Hello everyone. This is a presentation entitled The Cleansing of the Sanctuary. It's part of a 3, maybe 4-part series of presentations on Daniel chapter 8. So this particular presentation is going to go through Daniel chapter 8 phrase by phrase. And what I'm also going to do is, with some very crude graphics, try to illustrate the main points of that presentation. So let's get straight in. So let's just have a look at that again. That's a bit too quick. We see a goat hit a ram. The goat's horn is broken, 4 horns come up in its place, and then a little horn arises and takes up the Middle East and Europe, and then it casts down the place of the sanctuary, which I've not got any graphics for, and a few other things. But let's do it verse by verse. So what Daniel chapter 8 is doing is explaining what Daniel sees, what's going to happen, and what I want us to try to do is recognize what's being said in each of the phrases of Daniel chapter 8. So I begin with, when does this vision, when does this experience that Daniel has occur? So when? Daniel chapter 8 verse 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me. So it's in the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign. Who does the vision appear to? Even unto me, Daniel. And when? After that which appeared unto me at the first. So it's not just the 3rd year of Belshazzar, it's after the vision of Daniel chapter 7, which was in the 1st year of Belshazzar, if my memory serves me right. But it's after Daniel chapter 7 anyway. Verse 2, what happened? Daniel says, Daniel chapter 8 verse 2, and I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw. So he's having a vision, he receives a vision, and he's setting the place and time of that vision. So the next question in blue, where was he at the time? I was at Shushan, in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. Where was he in the vision? So although he's physically at Shushan, in the vision, he was by the river of Ulai. What did Daniel see? Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, he now identifies what he sees. A beast, an animal. There stood before the river, by the river of Ulai, a ram which had 2 horns. So he sees a ram with 2 horns. The 2 horns were high. So it's a ram with 2 horns. One was higher than the other. The horns aren't of the same height. The higher came up last. How long had the ram... I should have emphasized this. Whoops. There stood... excuse me. There stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. So there's a ram, it has 2 horns are high, the high came up last. But the key thing here is the ram is standing before the river. The ram is standing before the river. We'll see why that's key maybe in the next presentation, and a little bit in this one. So here's a question for you. The very first thing that Daniel sees in this vision is a ram standing by the river. And so the question is, how long had the ram been standing by the river? How long had that ram been poised to cross the river? Now, there's no explanation so far of how long the ram has been there. Daniel simply sees the ram standing by the river. So we don't yet know when the vision starts. We haven't got anything that can tell us the date. What was the ram doing? I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward. so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. Now, if the ram is standing by the river, these descriptions of pushing westward, northward, and southward, no beast standing in his way, neither was any that could deliver out of his hand, must occur before the ram is standing, unless the ram is both, not both, not the ram is either west or north of south of where they currently are. The ram is standing because no other beast could stand before him. So when it was pushing, no beast could stand before him, none could deliver out of his hand. The ram had become great. So this is the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, and no beast standing before him as he conquers, as he travels and destroys. We'll later find Babylon, and the ram is standing at the river. What else did Daniel see? Verse 5. And as I was considering the ram standing before the river, which had two horns, one was higher than another, behold, he now identifies something else that he sees. Behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. So the goat is coming in one of the directions that the ram was moving, westward, northward, and southward. The goat is coming from the west and therefore heading east on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. So it's flying. It's really moving very quickly. It's moving so fast it's not touching the ground, even though it's on the face of the whole earth. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. It's a strange goat that has a horn between his eyes, but nevertheless, that's what Daniel sees. So verse 6, Daniel explains a number of things. So what happened? The goat came to the ram. Which ram? That had two horns. Where? Which I had seen standing before the river. So clearly the ram that was seen standing before the river is the one the goat is coming to. And the goat ran onto him in the fury of his power. So when was this? That is interesting. So he sees the goat, but at which part of the goat's journey does Daniel see the ram? Sorry, does Daniel see the goat moving? So he sees the goat coming to the ram, but it doesn't say whether it's at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end, although there's a clue that we can spot here. And I saw him come close unto the ram. So he's somewhere on the journey, and he comes close to the ram and was moved with anger against the ram, smote the ram, snapped both horns, broke both horns. What else happened? And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. So the goat comes from the west on the face of the whole earth, touched not the ground, smites the ram, breaks his two horns. The ram can't stand with against a goat that's running at such pace and force, and so the ram is destroyed, as we can see in my very crude graphics, but I'm just trying to illustrate where it happens and what was the outcome. Therefore, the he-goat waxed very great. Then what happened? And when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and in his place, and for it came up four notable ones. Where? Toward the four winds of heaven. So you can see, as the Bible is explaining in Daniel chapter 8, it's actually answering questions that we ought to be asking as we read each of these verses of Scripture. So it's answering the questions. And so we can see that the ram is defeated by the goat with a single horn. Four horns come up in their place. And Out of one of those four horns, verse 9, came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. So it's heading south and east and toward the pleasant land. Pleasant land being Israel, further east of Turkey and Cyprus. So four horns replace the broken horn of the goat. Those four horns are replaced by a little horn that moves south and east and towards the pleasant land. And there's the pleasant land south and east of where the horn was. So verse 10, what happened to the horn? And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Now, I've not got any graphics of the host going up to heaven and casting down stars or stamping on them, but we understand the little horn is doing some things, and actually the host of heaven and the stars aren't literal heaven and stars. This relates to the activities of the little horn, which another presentation will address. Verse 11. What else does the horn do? So let's just remind ourselves. The horn waxes great, even to heaven, cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamps upon them. So it's destructive while magnifying himself. He magnified himself even to the prince of the host, the same prince of the host in heaven. What was taken away? And by him the daily was taken away. I've italicized sacrifice, because in Daniel chapter 8, sacrifice is added by the King James translators. So we should try to understand daily and not put too much significance on the King James understanding of sacrifice. And by him the daily was taken away. And what was cast down? Well, this is quite important. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. What was cast down? The sanctuary was cast down? Well, the prophecy is the place of the sanctuary. Now, what that means is the place of the sanctuary is bigger than the sanctuary itself. So the sanctuary is the temple. The place of the sanctuary is Jerusalem. So this little horn is going to cast down the sanctuary and the place of the sanctuary, the temple and Jerusalem. What was given to the horn? And an host was given him. Now, to understand host, and I've got another YouTube presentation all about the host, you need to understand down in chapter 10, verse 1. That was a reminder for me to let you know that there's a whole study on the host, which you'll find absolutely amazing. So what was given to the horn? An host was given him. For what purpose? Against the daily sacrifice. How? Sorry, I should have said against the daily. How? By reason of transgression. And the horn's transgression leads to consequences. So what were the consequences? Number 1, it cast down the truth to the ground. 2, it practiced. And 3, it prospered. So this horn has something to do with the destruction of truth. The horn is mentioned in Daniel chapter 7. An host, I'll just give a little insight into what a host is. In Daniel chapter 10, verse 1, the host is the word Tzaba. I think it's Strong 6635. It's translated in Daniel chapter 10, an appointed time. So what was given to the horn? An appointed time was given the little horn. For what purpose? Against the daily. By reason of transgression, it cast down truth to the ground. So this little horn has an appointed time and casts down truth to the ground. It practices and prospers. And when we see the angel Gabriel explaining, it says it becomes exceedingly great. Verse 13. So, because I believe that this is the key verse for understanding Daniel chapter 8, I just want to remind us what we're doing here. Daniel chapter 8 verse 13 says, "Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint we spake, how long shall be the vision?" So those are the words that are said. But I want us to notice carefully. One, who is speaking? Daniel hears a saint speaking. Where does he hear this saint? It's in his vision. What did another saint do in his vision? And another saint said unto that certain saint we spake. What did that other saint say? So what was the question asked by this other saint to the first saint? The question that's asked is, how long shall be the vision? So Daniel chapter 8 is about a vision. In Daniel's vision, he hears one saint speaking to another saint saying, how long shall be this vision? How long shall be this vision? How long shall be this vision? That is the key to understanding Daniel chapter 8 and the vision that Daniel had in chapter 8. Verse 13 continues, and I'm asking which vision? The vision. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? So this vision ends up with the little horn trampling the daily sacrifice, transgressing and desolating. As a result, the sanctuary and the host, and I've just given you a clue as to what the host is. It's something to do with the appointed time, is trodden underfoot. But we're not covering that in this presentation. So to understand the answer to the question, we must first understand the question. What is being asked? The question is, how long shall be the vision? So an answer is going to come in the very next verse, but we must recognize what it is a question, it is an answer to. It is an answer to how long shall be the vision. So in order to understand how long the vision is, we must understand when the vision starts, because the time that we're going to see in terms of the duration of the vision must have a starting point. So let's have a look at the answer to the question, how long shall be the vision that we've just seen? So before we have a look at the question, when did the vision that we've seen start? Was it when the ram came into existence? Was it when the ram was standing? Was it when the goat came into existence? Was it when the goat encountered the ram? Or was it at the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem? Now, most of you won't understand that last question, but there is a significant number of people who, in answer to the question, how long should be the vision, say that the answer to the question is at the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem from Daniel chapter 9. Doesn't look like that's the answer to the question based on the context we've seen so far. So here are some clues to understand when the vision starts. The first thing Daniel saw was a ram stand, and that ram standing occurs 3 times. So verse 3, there stood before the river a ram. Verse 6, the ram had 2 horns which I had seen standing before the river. And verse 7, there was no power in the ram to stand before him. So the ram is standing. The other clue is the he-goat came, verse 5, from the west. He came to the ram, verse 6, and verse 7. I've missed out the 7 there. I saw him come close onto the ram. So the clues are, we don't know how long the ram has been standing. We don't know at what point the goat is coming on its journey. But when these two encounter each other, the ram and the goat, we have a definite time. So the first thing we can put a time to is when the ram is defeated by the goat, coming with color and power. Verse 14. Who was the answer given to? And he said unto Daniel, he said unto me, unto 2,300 days. So how long would be the vision? Unto 2,300 days. And then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So what happens after the 2,300 days? Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. After 2,300 days, the sanctuary will be cleansed. That is what he said to Daniel. So here's a question. If the process begins after 2,300 years, then there are a number of issues. What is so important about the start date of the cleansing process for Daniel? How long will the cleansing process take? Is it days, weeks, months, years, centuries? Any time prophecy can be made to fit the end of a process that takes decades or centuries to complete. So it sounds like if we believe that it's months and years or even centuries, then it doesn't sound like the sanctuary is will be cleansed in a time that any generation can see from beginning to end. The cleansing process takes place over 6 days, and on the 7th day the people had rest. But more in the next presentation. I'm just giving you a clue, setting you up for the next one. So here's a question. Is it possible to have a sanctuary without a temple? In Daniel chapter 9 and verse 17, Daniel says, Now therefore, O our God, hear the prayer of thy servant and his supplications, and cause thy face to shine upon thy sanctuary that is desolate, for the Lord's sake. So in Daniel chapter 9, Daniel's talking about the sanctuary that is desolate. It's been burnt and destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel is in Babylon as he's making this prayer at the end of the 70 years because he wishes to return and see God's people return. And so in Daniel chapter 8, the sanctuary doesn't exist, but the cleansing of the sanctuary and the restoration of the sanctuary is something that can be referred to even though the sanctuary has been destroyed. Daniel is praying for the sanctuary that is desolate to be restored, and in its restoration having God's name and reputation being restored. That's why he says, for the Lord's sake. So after 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. We get 5 verses, and I'm going to read them and then make some statements. And it came to pass when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Let me go backwards first. Verse 18. As he was speaking with me, this is Gabriel speaking with him, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. What's going on here? Daniel's had this dream and vision. He hears in the dream and vision one saint speaking, another saint speaking, and verse 16, I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai. Now, when you hear, you don't necessarily see, unless you're in real life. But Daniel is telling you where Gabriel is speaking. I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai. So he's still in vision. In vision, he hears the statement, because even in vision, verse 15, I'd seen the vision, sought for the meaning, and there stood before me as the appearance of a man. I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So Gabriel is about to explain to Daniel the understanding, the meaning of the vision. He's going to make Daniel understand. Now, this isn't Gabriel's initiative. I heard a man's voice which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. And so the explanation is coming from someone who's giving Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, instruction. And when Gabriel comes, verse 17, Gabriel says, understand. I forgot to highlight that. Verse 17, understand. So make this man to understand the vision. Understand, O Son of Man, I will make thee know. 3 times. 3 times in these 4 verses, it appears Gabriel is instructed to make Daniel understand. Gabriel says, understand. And Gabriel continues, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Gabriel is going to explain in general principles the detail of this prophecy, the vision that Daniel had seen. Now, again, it's really important that we recognize verse 18. I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but it touched me and set me upright. It's difficult to be set upright, to stand up, or to sit upright if he is still in a deep sleep. So Daniel is now aware, and Daniel hears, behold, look, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the nation, that time appointed the end shall be. Gabriel is explaining to Daniel while he's awake now. And so when we see verse 20, Daniel, having seen the vision just a few seconds earlier, is about to receive the full detail of not just the explanation of all those symbols and activities, but the answer to verse 13, how long shall be the vision, is the first thing that Gabriel will explain. So let's have a look. Look at this, verse 20 of Daniel chapter 8. The ram which you saw having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. This is a prophecy. Something's going to happen in the future. And Gabriel is calling by name the ram with 2 horns, each horn being a king, one of Media, the other of Persia. Verse 21. And the rough goat is the king of Greece, or Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. We now know that that's Alexander the Great. The players in the vision are clearly identified, leaving no doubt whatsoever as to which nations are involved at the beginning of the vision. It is Greece and its king destroying the power of Media and Persia. The Second World Empire is being replaced by the Third World Empire, as is detailed in Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7. So what was Media Persia doing? So what we're going to do is going to quickly go back through the entrance or the beginning of Daniel. And so wherever we see ram, we'll replace it with Media Persia. Wherever we see goat, we'll replace it with either Greece. Where we see the horns of Media Persia, we'll talk about their names. And when we see the horn of the goat, we'll replace it with the appropriate name. So here we are. This is Daniel chapter 8 with Gabriel's interpretation put in. I saw Media Persia pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no nations might stand before Media Persia. Neither was there any that could deliver out of Media Persia's hand. But Media Persia did according to his will and became great. What else did he see? And as I was considering, behold, Greece came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And Greece had Alexander the Great between his or its eyes. And what happened? Greece came to Media Persia, that had Darius and Cyrus, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. Now that is the key to understanding 2,300 days. When did Greece defeat Medo-Persia by a river? And it's interesting that that is wasn't the complete destruction of Medo-Persia, but it began at a battle at a river. And I saw Greece come close unto Medo-Persia, and Greece was moved with choler against Medo-Persia, and smote Medo-Persia, and brake Darius and Cyrus. And there was no power in Medo-Persia to stand before Greece, but Greece cast Medo-Persia down to the ground and stamped upon Medo-Persia, and there was none that could deliver Medo-Persia out of Greece's hand. And because all I'm doing is helping us to understand when the vision starts, and I'm going through Daniel verse by verse, I am simply setting the scene for the next presentation. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true, wherefore shut thou up the vision, it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So, Daniel 8 is really very short in terms of what he's seen. We are given enough of an explanation to at least understand when the vision starts and ends within the vision itself. The vision concerns the place of the sanctuary, verse 11. Now, because we've spent, I say we, because the organization that I am in has spent so much time focusing on a different interpretation of Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, we haven't really spent much time looking at the activities of the horn as Gabriel explains them, which gives so much insight into the time of the end. So Daniel finishes by saying, having seen the vision and heard the explanation, he was sick certain days. Afterward, he rose up and did the king's business. He was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope that you'll follow on to the next one to get a full analysis of when the vision started, when the 2,300 days complete. God bless you all.